it. You ain't never ever gonna break it. You can never beat them and they're better than you face it. Thinking that they give a damn, you're not thinking straight, kid. No, they don't give a damn, you got what I'm saying? I'm not fucking playing, I'll give it to you straight, man. There's too many others and you're not that great, man. Stop what you're saying, stop what you're making. Everybody here knows that you just faking. Nah, I don't wanna hear it anymore. I don't wanna hear it anymore. All these fucking thoughts, they are not what I need anymore. I'm about to shut the motherfucking door on all you poor ass haters with your heads in the clouds, talking out loud so proud. You better shut your goddamn mouth before I do more speak out. It's about to head south.
Never gonna make it.
What is up, guys? Welcome to another banger. Just joking, my videos suck. But anyways, I thought that having one video out today wouldn't be fair because I was gone for 2 months. So this will be what if Deku had quirk creation. Essentially what this is Deku can create quirks, and he has 20 slots for quirks. And when Deku creates a quirk, it has to, actually he has 21 slots. So when he creates a quirk, it has to have like something that that can make the quirk fail or have recoil. But he can use 5 of the slots to make a quirk without recoil, and he can delete quirks too, and as he gets stronger he'll get more quirks. Okay, so we'll start this at the hospital. They get there, they know that Deku has a quirk, and they try all their tests. They don't know what quirk he has. Then they ask him, what kind of quirk would you want? And he says, well, I really want a quirk like All Might, so I guess a quirk that gives me super speed and super strength. And he creates a quirk that gives him super speed and super strength. And they're just astounded by this. So they're like, okay, what other quirks would you want? They have him keep naming quirks until he reaches 21 quirks. And then they ask him, would any of these quirks have fallbacks? Then he says, yeah, actually all of them would. I don't know why though. And then they come to a conclusion that all his quirks, he can create up to 21 quirks, but they all have recoil. So then they say, make a quirk that doesn't harm you or make things bad for you. So he decides, I want a quirk like All Might. Wait, but before this he deletes all of his quirks, of course. He says, I want a quirk like All Might that doesn't do anything bad. And then he says, it worked. Then they tell him to make some more, so he makes 3 more. The power to control lightning and move it. But this one, no, that will be the last quirk. So he creates the power to move fire, to make and control fire, the power to make and control water, and the power to move the ground. And so Deku creates 4 quirks that take up 20 slots. And then he's like, I can't create another quirk that doesn't have something that harms myself or puts me at risk. I don't understand why. And then they come to the conclusion that maybe the quirks that don't do anything bad to him take up 5 slots. So they tell him to just create another quirk. Then he creates a quirk like Denki's, which will kind of like be like my what if Deku had Dinky's quirk, but he won't be working on it as much. And so, since Deku created a quirk like All Might, but he decides, I don't really know All Might's quirk that well. I should create a quirk that lets me understand the quirks. So he gets rid of the power to move the earth, and he makes a quirk called quirk assessment. And basically what this does is it makes it so that Deku can understand any quirk at first sight. So, or like when he uses it. So now he uses it to find out what All Might's quirk can do. Then he's like, really? That's so cool. I didn't know this. Why did All Might keep it a secret? And so then he like understands the other quirks, like the power to create water, where he can manipulate water, and he can even make water soldiers, like living water soldiers, if he gets really advanced in it. And he finds out that All Might's quirk has multiple quirks, so he got multiple quirks out of saying that he wanted one. So he also, like the soldiers thing and the creation is the same for the fire too. So he can make like fire dragons. Yeah, so he thinks that it's really cool. Then he gets an understanding of Dinky's quirk, and then he's like, okay, so for my lightning quirk, I just have to keep it on, kind of like All Might's quirk. So he keeps it on, and we'll just skip to when he is at the daycare or in kindergarten, whatever it is, with Bakugo. The whole thing with Bakugo saying that he has the best quirk, and then Deku all of a sudden says, hey, I have a quirk too. Then he's like, what lame quirk do you have? Because they were praising him, and he's like, yeah, it's the best quirk ever compared to these losers. So he just assumed that Deku has a bad quirk. So Deku explains his quirk. Then Kachan's like, no way, that's not possible. And then he tries to use an explosion, which isn't that strong since he just got it, and he can barely make since he just got it. He tries to make one to hit Deku, and all Deku does is make a wall of fire. But it's a really small wall because Deku's not that strong. And then he realizes that Deku wasn't lying when Deku uses a super strength quirk. And he knows about, like, his quirk understanding told him that All Might wanted to keep that part about his quirk, certain parts about his quirk a secret, so he just called his quirk superpower. So he shows them super strength by destroying a tree. He shows them. Also, he can only use 1% of One for All. I just want to point that out. And the manifesting quirks and One for All, he doesn't really understand those yet. Basically, he has to master One for All before he can use those. So after he shows them all of the quirks, they're just like, that's amazing. And he says that the lightning one is the most creative, he thinks, because even though he can't create lightning dragons that live on their own and he has to control them manually, and soldiers, he thinks that it's the most creative, and because he can create lightning that can like paralyze someone or help someone move who is disabled or has super speed and super strength. So he says that it's a really good one. And then we skip ahead to the sludge villain attack. Well, I guess I really haven't explained his personality. Deku doesn't go like catch on like, oh my gosh, my quirk's so good, or like how people say that his personality completely changes. He just thinks, wow, I was lucky to be born with a quirk. I'm happy that I'm not quirkless. I feel bad for quirkless people. That's why I must protect them at all cost. So, the sludge villain attacks, but Deku just puts a ball of water around him to protect him. So the sludge monster is like around the water, but he can't get in, and then Deku decides to transfer and turn it into fire. And he gets an understanding of the sludge villain's quirk, and when he gets understandings of the quirks, usually the understanding that he gets is like better than the person themselves understands. So now he knows more about the sludge villain's quirk than the sludge villain himself, and he just uses fire to keep the sludge villain away. And then he decides, I should end this already. And he turns into lightning, gets on the other side of the sludge villain really quickly, mixes fire, water, and super strength, and ground, because he's been practicing with this quirk a lot, and he's unlocked 5 more slots. So he has the power of ground again. So now he uses them all at once, and it just completely dominates the sludge villain. And then he put the sludge villain in a circle. He like puts a dome over the sludge villain that it can't get out of. And then he says, oh, I better call the cops. And instead of being able to use 1% like as a child, Deku, I'd say Deku by now, he'd be using 10% of One For All, and his other quirks would get powered up naturally, which makes him like really strong. So others are like, don't mess with that kid. He might even try to create a quirk to kill you. That kid's power. I'm just happy that he's a hero, because if he became a villain, he'd be way more useful to the villains than he is to the heroes. I'm just happy that he's on our side. So everyone's like kind of scared of Deku except for Bakugo, who knows that there are people with stronger quirks than his, and he actually becomes actual friends, and he's not like a bad person, because everyone's not just praising him and then letting him get away with stuff. So he locks up the sludge villain, is about to call the cops, then All Might appears and says, hey there kid, have you seen a green blob monster thing? I think it was sludge villain. And Deku's like, oh, you mean this thing? Then he creates a hole in the earth, and he lets All Might see him. But he covers the hole with water so the sludge villain still can't get out. Because he doesn't want the sludge villain to get out. Of course. So now the sludge villain's just stuck right there, and All Might's like, alright, well, can you make it so that he can get out? Then Deku decides, I understand that he All Might, but would this be a smart move? And then he's just like, whatever. I want a good impression with All Might anyway. So he opens it up, and the sludge villain tries to come out really fastly, but All Might just traps him in a bottle. So now they captured the sludge villain. And All Might's like, hey, thanks, kid. What's your quirk anyway? Is it water and earth? And he says, no, my quirk is the power to control quirk. I mean, not control, the power to make quirks. And he says how he copied All Might's quirk, and he found out some things about All Might's quirk. And All Might's like, listen, kid, you can't tell. And then Deku cuts him off. I know. I can't tell anyone about your quirk. I've known about it since a little kid, but I haven't told anyone. And don't worry, since I created a quirk that's exactly like it, instead of it being like that quirk, there's like two of them going around now. So you can still have a successor, and I think I know who that should be. Then he says, are you sure that we should have two people with One for All? And he's like, don't you want two really strong heroes instead of one? In fact, I know about the origin of your quirk, and I was going to try to find All for One and take him down, but then I thought he might have a bunch of speed quirks and be faster than me. Take my quirk, and then he'd be unstoppable, and he'd have infinite quirk capacity as a power. So his taking quirk has infinite quirks that he can take, which would be really bad. So he decided not to go after All for One. And he tells him, I know who the successor should be. Then he's like, I'm open ears, kid. I mean, you seem pretty smart to have figured out that whole thing with All for One. And then he says, it should be my best friend. And then All Might's like, kid, I know that he's your best friend, but you can't just tell me I should make your best friend my successor. I mean, I get that you want to continue being friends with him when you go to be a hero, but you need to make sure that this would benefit him a lot. Then he says, I know All Might, and his name is Kachan, and he has the power explosion, and he's been practicing a lot. And in this, he's been practicing way more just to keep up with a 10th of Deku, at least. So, but of course he's more like a 20th. So then he says, you know, if he really had One for All, even though we both had it, with his explosion quirk, you know, he could become a good rival. And then All Might's like, alright, so where's this friend of yours? And then he says, oh, actually, I called him up. Well, more like I sent a ground soldier to get him and told him about you and told him to watch this. Kachan, you can come out now. So now he's just like, hey kid, that wasn't a smart move. You shouldn't have done something like that. Could have been dangerous. Then he said, Kachan's my friend. I know my friend best. He wouldn't have done anything dangerous. Kachan wants to become a hero for a reason, you know. And so then he's like, so kid, show me what you can do. So they go to the beach, and he's like, if you can impress me, I will train you here. And then he just says, alright, I know that I shouldn't try to aim for him to be like, wow, that wasn't your full power. Instead, I should aim for him to be like, wow, your power's really strong and I could help you improve it. So he's like, well, better use full power. So he uses his full power, and All Might sees his full power, and he's like, are you serious? This type of power, it's and then Deku says, explosive. I know. And All Might says, this kid, he must in his head. And then he says, Bakugo, was it? Katsuki Bakugo, I see. So I ask you, will you let me take you as my successor? And he's like, of course. And then they go home, but before that, All Might says, hey, both of you come to the beach. I'll train both of you about the power of one for all. Then Deku says, oh yeah. And Kachan's body was already fit, so he just gave Kachan the power immediately. And then he says, oh yeah, both of you, one for all. It actually has hidden quirks inside of it. Remember how one for all can be passed down? It passes down the quirk that you have. Well, I'm surprised that you didn't figure this out already. It passed down the quirks of the previous owners that they naturally had. So now there are 7 hidden quirks. I think it was 7. Correct me if I'm wrong. So now there are 7 hidden quirks. And actually, I've come to barely know one. And this one is called Black Whip. And All Might says, alright, I'll have to tell the Hero Association about this and make sure that they keep it a secret. And so the next day, they all meet up at the beach, and I will be ending the video here, guys. I hope you liked the video. Weeaboo Warrior out.